There are moments that happen in half a second, yet they reveal more than 1,000 interviews ever could. One small, harmless hug. One glance that changes too quickly. And suddenly, the air feels different, like someone's heart spoke before their mind could catch up. Today, on LVT-SHOWBIZ, we're breaking down the moment viewers can't stop replaying, not to declare a verdict, but to understand why this clip feels so emotionally loud without anyone saying a single word. At first glance, nothing about the moment seemed remarkable. It was the kind of interaction that happens countless times on a busy set. A brief, friendly hug between Li Qin and a member of staff. There was no spectacle, no lingering gesture, no intention to draw attention. Precisely because of its ordinariness, it passed unnoticed until it didn't. What changed the atmosphere was not the action itself, but the reaction it quietly triggered nearby. When the camera shifted to Chen Zheyuan, viewers sensed a subtle disruption, as though the emotional temperature of the scene had shifted by a degree or two. Nothing dramatic occurred, yet something unmistakably human surfaced. The contrast between the simplicity of the hug and the weight of his response created an emotional imbalance that audiences instinctively felt. This is where the power of the moment lies. It did not rely on drama, confrontation, or explicit signals. Instead, it felt like a private emotion briefly exposed in a public space. That fleeting imbalance, the sense that something internal had surfaced without permission, invited viewers to look again and then again. In that split second, the ordinary transformed into something quietly compelling, setting the foundation for everything that followed. Chen Zheyuan's reaction was not loud, exaggerated, or theatrical. In fact, it was precisely the opposite. It was brief, restrained, and incomplete, what many viewers describe as a micro-leak of emotion. A tightening around the eyes, a fleeting sharpness in his gaze, a mouth that failed to settle into its usual composure. These were not gestures designed to be seen. They appeared before control had time to intervene. What makes such moments resonate is their unpolished nature. Public figures are trained to regulate expression, especially under the constant presence of cameras. When that regulation falters, even momentarily, audiences tend to interpret it as authenticity rather than performance. This reaction did not announce itself. It slipped through. Crucially, the content does not insist on a single interpretation. It does not label the emotion definitively. Instead, it allows viewers to recognize the pattern from their own lives, the instant when feeling arrives before logic, when emotion briefly takes the lead. That familiarity is what anchors belief. The reaction felt less like an act and more like an instinct, and instincts, once glimpsed, are difficult to dismiss. After the initial reaction, something equally telling followed. Chen Zheyuan appeared to shift his attention to his phone, a gesture that many recognized instantly. In contemporary life, the phone has become more than a device. It is a refuge, a shield, a socially acceptable way to withdraw without explanation. Yet the camera suggested that this was not true engagement. The phone was held, but not meaningfully used. Fingers paused. Eyes wandered. The gesture read less as distraction and more as self-management. It was as if the phone offered a temporary barrier between internal emotion and external exposure. This detail resonated strongly because it mirrors everyday behavior. People often reach for small rituals to regain composure, adjusting clothing, checking messages, focusing elsewhere. These acts are not deception. They are coping mechanisms. In this context, the phone symbolized an attempt to restore balance, to quietly reclaim control after an emotional interruption. Ironically, the effort to appear unaffected only heightened viewers' awareness. The attempt to mask feeling made the feeling itself more visible. In this way, the phone move became one of the most relatable aspects of the entire clip. A modern, recognizable response to emotional vulnerability in a public setting. What followed shifted the emotional tone once again. Chen appeared to notice the subtle change and responded not with words meant for the room, but with gestures meant for one person. Her approach was unhurried and discreet. She did not command attention or create a scene. Instead, she lowered the volume of the moment. Her body language conveyed awareness rather than alarm, care rather than correction. A quiet word, a gentle presence, a brief touch on the arm. Small actions that carried emotional weight precisely because they were understated. This response suggested not only sensitivity but familiarity, the kind that comes from recognizing another person's emotional state without needing explanation. Viewers responded strongly to this dynamic because it represented a different kind of strength. Not dominance, not drama, but emotional intelligence. The ability to soothe without display, to support without spectacle. In a highly visible environment, such restraint reads as trust. Whether interpreted as professional empathy or something deeper, the exchange added a second emotional layer to the narrative. It reframed the moment not as isolation, but as connection. Quiet, mutual, and grounded in awareness rather than declaration. One of the most important reinterpretations offered by this content is the distinction between possessive jealousy and protective presence. Rather than framing the reaction as ownership or exclusion, the narrative opens space for a more generous understanding. The desire to be emotionally close, rather than emotionally controlling. Protective presence is subtle. It does not seek to limit another's actions. Instead, it reflects a wish to remain emotionally relevant, to be the person who notices, supports, and stays attuned. When viewed through this lens, the reaction becomes less about discomfort with others and more about sensitivity to one's own emotional attachment. This distinction matters, particularly in public discourse. It shifts the tone from accusation to empathy, from suspicion to understanding. It allows audiences to recognize complexity rather than reduce the moment to a single label. By offering this perspective, the content encourages healthier emotional interpretation. Strong feelings need not be framed as negative. They can be understood as part of human connection, messy, restrained, and deeply personal, especially when lived under public scrutiny. One reason this moment resonates so widely is that it does not rely on confirmation. No statements were issued, no explanations were offered. Yet the scene feels emotionally credible. This credibility arises from structure rather than certainty. The sequence unfolds naturally. An ordinary trigger, an unguarded reaction, followed by a quiet attempt at repair. This arc mirrors everyday emotional experience, making it intuitively believable. Viewers do not need proof, they need resonance. Ambiguity plays a crucial role here. By leaving space for interpretation, the content respects the intelligence and emotional agency of its audience. It does not instruct viewers what to think. It invites them to feel first, analyze second. In an era saturated with declarations and denials, this restraint feels refreshing. The absence of explanation becomes the story itself. The clip feels real, not because it confirms anything, but because it reflects how real emotions often appear, briefly, imperfectly, and without subtitles. If you enjoyed this kind of calm, detailed breakdown, where we focus on what's visible, keep it respectful, and still explore the emotions beneath the surface, then please subscribe to LVT-SHOWBIZ. Thank you for watching and for keeping the conversation thoughtful in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, share it with a friend who loves subtle chemistry moments, and stay tuned. because the smallest clips often tell the biggest stories.